I'm 28 years old, and right now I'm pressed against this wooden door while my father stands on the other side, screaming that I am filth. I'm looking at papers scattered all over the floor, my return ticket to Australia, a flight I was supposed to be on 3 days ago, but I wasn't allowed to board it. I'm writing this because I need someone to understand how I ended up here, trapped in my childhood home, 7,000 miles away from the life I built. 3 years ago, my family completely cut me off. The reason? I refused to fly back to India for a medical surgery. They wanted me to leave my life in Australia, leave my job, leave everything, just to have a procedure done at home. When I chose to have it done in Australia instead, they stopped speaking to me entirely. For a full year, there was nothing but silence. Eventually, they reached out. I was so relieved. I thought maybe we could rebuild what we'd lost. But every conversation after that was either a fight or completely hollow. How's work? What did you eat today? Nothing real. Nothing that actually mattered. We were strangers performing the script of a family. Then last year, they showed up in Australia without warning. My partner and I met them for dinner. It was tense. They made it clear they weren't happy about my choices, about him, about the life I'd built. But I still held on to hope, because here's the thing. I'm ready to move forward with my life. I've been with my Australian partner for over 5 years. We want to get married. We've talked about having children, and as much as I wanted to believe I could do that without my family, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed them there, that those future moments wouldn't feel complete without them. So I made a decision. I would give them one more chance. I booked a trip to India. 3 weeks total. My partner would come for the first week, then I'd stay alone with my family for 2 weeks. They were insistent about that part. We only want time. With you, they said. At the time, I thought it was sweet. That they missed me. That they wanted to really reconnect. Now I realize it was strategic. When we arrived, they made excuses about why we couldn't stay with them while my partner was here. Not enough room. The timing isn't right, but they agreed to meet us for lunch the day he was leaving. They smiled. They were cordial. They asked him polite questions. I actually thought, maybe this is working. Maybe this trip was going to fix everything. Then his plane took off, and everything changed. The moment I started staying with them alone, the pressure began. You should extend your trip. Why do you need to go back so soon? Stay another week. Stay another month. I kept saying no. I had a job. I had responsibilities. I had a return flight booked, but they wouldn't accept it. The requests turned into demands. The demands turned into fights, and then came the day my father looked at me, his own daughter, and said I was filth. That I live in filth. That he couldn't believe he'd wasted his love on filth all these years. Those words, they broke something inside me. But it was just the beginning. They started parading me around to relatives, introducing me like I'd never left. Like I was staying permanently. When the day of my return flight came, they physically blocked me from leaving. My mother stood in front of the door. My father took my passport. And that's when they said it clearly. The Australian chapter is closed. You're staying here now. I'm trapped. My brother, who's bigger and stronger than me, is on their side. He's made it clear he'll stop me if I try to leave. I've cried. I've begged. I've tried to reason with them. But they truly believe they're saving me from myself. That my independence is a sickness. That bringing me home is an act of love. If you think your family is controlling, wait until you hear how mine lured me across the world just to lock me in a cage I can never escape. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I believe this story found you today for a reason. You'd think a family would want their daughter to be healthy, no matter where she got treated. It was 3 years ago when everything fell apart. I needed surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but necessary. I was living in Australia, working full-time, building a life I was proud of. My doctors here were excellent. The procedure could be done within weeks. Everything made sense to do it locally. But when I told my parents, their response wasn't concern about my health. It was an ultimatum. Come back to India for the surgery, or they would consider it a betrayal. They framed it as if getting medical care in Australia meant I was rejecting them. Rejecting my culture, rejecting everything they'd given me. My father actually said, "If you can't come home for something this important, then what's the point of having a daughter?" I tried to explain. I had work commitments. I had insurance here that covered everything. The recovery time would be easier in my own apartment with my partner, helping me. Flying internationally right before a surgery seemed unnecessarily risky. None of it mattered. To them, it was simple. If I loved them, I would get on a plane. I chose to stay. I had the surgery in Australia. It went perfectly. I recovered well. But the price I paid had nothing to do with medical bills. My parents stopped speaking to me completely. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was like I'd died. For 12 months I was a ghost. I'd wake up some mornings and instinctively reach for my phone to call my mother. Then remember. She'd decided I no longer existed. When they finally reached out a year later, I was so desperate for connection that I ignored every red flag. But those conversations were hollow. We'd talk for 10 minutes and say absolutely nothing. "How's work?" "Fine." "What did you eat?" "Pasta." "Okay, bye." No real questions, no vulnerability, no acknowledgement of the year of silence or why it happened. Just this performance of a relationship with none of the substance. Looking back, I should have seen it clearly. They weren't interested in repairing anything. They were waiting for me to break, to prove I needed them more than they needed me. And when I didn't break, they decided they'd have to force it. Last year, I learned that my parents don't believe in boundaries. They believe in ambushes. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We're in Australia. We'll see you tonight for dinner." Not, "We're thinking of visiting." Not, "Would you be available?" Just a statement. They'd flown across the world without telling me, booked a hotel, and expected me to drop everything. The message felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. I panicked. My apartment wasn't prepared for visitors. More importantly, I wasn't prepared. After barely a year of cold, surface-level phone calls, they were suddenly here, in my city, demanding FaceTime. My partner could see how stressed I was. "We don't have to go if you're not ready," he said. But I knew if I refused, it would be used as ammunition. Another example of how I'd abandoned them, so we went to dinner, and it was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd feared. They were polite to my partner in that specific way that feels worse than outright hostility. My mother asked him where he was from, what his parents did, whether he understood our culture. Every question had a subtext. My father barely looked at him. When my partner talked about his work, my father would nod absently and then redirect the conversation back to me as if my partner wasn't even there. At one point, my mother said, "It must be hard for you being so far from home," while staring directly at me. Not at him. At me. Like I was the one who needed rescuing. My partner squeezed my hand under the table. The worst part was near the end. My father finally addressed my partner directly. "You know, in our culture, family is everything. We don't just leave and forget where we came from." My partner smiled tightly and said, "I think she remembers exactly where she's from. That's why she wanted us to meet you." The silence that followed was deafening. When we left the restaurant, I felt nauseous. My partner asked if I was okay, and I lied and said yes. But I knew something fundamental had just happened. They'd come to Australia to evaluate my life, and they'd decided it wasn't acceptable. I just didn't realize yet that they were already planning how to dismantle it. I made the decision to fly to India because I couldn't imagine my future children never knowing their grandparents. 5 years with my partner had taught me what healthy love looked like. We'd talked about marriage seriously. We'd discussed children, when, how many, what kind of parents we wanted to be. And every time I pictured those moments, there was this hole. My parents weren't there. My mother wouldn't be at my wedding. My father wouldn't meet his grandchildren. And it gutted me. I know what you're thinking. After everything they'd put me through, the year of silence, the cold phone calls, the hostile dinner in Australia, why would I want them there? But trauma does something strange to your brain. It makes you believe that if you just try hard enough, love correctly enough, sacrifice enough, you can fix people who don't want to be fixed. I genuinely believed that if I showed up in India, if I gave them dedicated time without distractions, we could rebuild what was broken. So I booked the trip. 3 weeks. My partner would come for the first week, then I'd stay alone with my parents for 2 more. When I told them the plan, they were thrilled about the 2 weeks alone. "We need time with just you," my mother said. "We want to really talk, just our family." It sounded reasonable, sweet even, like they missed their daughter. My partner was supportive but concerned. "Are you sure about the 2 weeks alone?" he asked. "What if things go wrong?" I assured him it would be fine. They were my parents. They wouldn't actually hurt me. Besides, I'd have my return ticket. I could always leave early if needed. Looking back, I can see how carefully they'd set it up. The insistence on time alone. The enthusiasm when I agreed. They knew exactly what they were doing. They needed my partner out of the country. They needed me isolated. They needed me vulnerable. But I didn't see it. I was too busy imagining a future where my children would run into their grandmother's arms. Where my wedding photos would include my father walking me down the aisle. Where I could have both worlds, the life I'd built and the family I was born into. I thought I was planning a reconciliation. I didn't realize I was walking into a trap. For 7 days, my parents were the family I'd always wanted them to be. When my partner and I arrived in India, I was bracing for tension. But they surprised me. They were warm. They smiled. They asked him about his flight, his work, his family back in Australia. My mother even laughed at one of his jokes. It felt surreal, like stepping into an alternate reality where the last 3 years of coldness had never happened. Of course, they'd made an excuse about why we couldn't stay with them. "The guest room isn't ready. We're having work done on the house." It seemed plausible enough, so we stayed at a nearby hotel. They'd meet us for lunches and dinners, show us around the city, introduce us to relatives who were polite and curious. My partner whispered to me one night, "See? This isn't so bad. I think they're really trying." I wanted so badly to believe him. The mask didn't slip once that entire week. They took us to their favorite restaurants. My father told stories from his childhood that actually made us laugh. My mother asked my partner thoughtful questions about his career goals, his interests, even his opinion on cricket. It was almost normal. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I could have both, my life in Australia and my family's acceptance. On the 7th day, we met them for lunch. It was the day my partner's flight back to Australia was scheduled for that evening. The meal was pleasant. My mother held my hand across the table and said, "We're so glad you came. We've missed you so much." My father nodded, his expression softer than I'd seen in years. When we said goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, my partner hugged them both. "Thank you for welcoming me," he said. My mother smiled. "Of course. You're part of the family now." I watched my partner's taxi disappear toward the airport, and my father put his arm around my shoulder. "Come on," he said aloud. "Let's go home. We have so much to catch up on, just the 3 of us." I thought he meant conversation. I didn't realize he meant the rest of my life. The warmth lasted exactly as long as it took for my partner's flight to leave Indian airspace. That first evening alone with my parents, my mother made my favorite meal. We sat around the dining table like we used to when I was younger, and for a moment it felt healing. Then my father said casually, "You should extend your trip. 2 weeks isn't nearly enough time." I laughed it off. "I can't. I have work." My mother touched my arm. "Surely they can manage without you for a little longer. When will we get this chance again?" I explained that I'd already arranged my time off carefully, that my boss was expecting me back, that I had responsibilities. They nodded, but I could see something harden in their expressions. The conversation moved on, but the ease from dinner was gone. The next day it came up again, and the day after that. Each time I said no, their tone shifted slightly. Less asking, more insisting. You're being selfish. We flew all the way to Australia to see you, and you couldn't even be bothered to stay. 2 weeks is an insult after 3 years apart. The guilt was weaponized with surgical precision. By day 4, we weren't discussing it anymore. We were fighting about it. My mother would cry and say I clearly didn't love them. My father would go silent and cold, refusing to speak to me for hours. Then they'd warm up again, suggesting we visit another relative, take another trip, as if the fights hadn't happened. It was dizzying. I couldn't tell which version of them was real. I started counting down the days until my flight. 9 days left. 8 days. 7. Every morning I'd wake up and check my ticket confirmation just to reassure myself that escape was coming. My mother noticed once and her face twisted. "Still so eager to leave us," she said, her voice dripping with hurt. I tried to explain that it wasn't about wanting to leave them. It was about having a life I needed to return to. But they didn't see a difference. To them, having a life outside of their control was the same as rejection. Then came the day my father stopped pretending to be reasonable. There are words you can never unhear, especially when they come from the person who's supposed to love you unconditionally. It was day 10. I'd refused to extend my trip for what felt like the 100th time, and my father's patience finally shattered. We were in the living room. My mother had gone quiet, which I'd learned meant she agreed with whatever was coming. My father stood up, and I could see his hands trembling, not from sadness, but from rage. "Do you know what you are?" he said, his voice low and cold. "You are filth." I actually laughed at first, a nervous, disbelieving sound. Surely he didn't mean it literally. But he stepped closer, his face contorted with disgust. "You live in filth. You've chosen filth over your family. That man you're with, that life you're so proud of, it's all filth. And I cannot believe I have spent 28 years loving filth, caring for filth, sacrificing for filth." Each repetition of the word felt like a physical blow. My mother sat there silent, her hands folded in her lap, not disagreeing, not defending me, just accepting his assessment as truth. I tried to respond, to argue, to defend myself, but my throat had closed up. Tears were streaming down my face and I couldn't make them stop. He saw me crying and it seemed to fuel him further. "This is what Australia has done to you," he continued. "It's made you selfish, ungrateful, dirty. You think you're independent, but you're just lost. You think you're happy, but you're living like an animal. No values, no respect, no connection to who you really are." I managed to choke out, "I'm still your daughter." He looked at me for a long moment, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was revulsion. My daughter died 3 years ago when she chose a surgery in a foreign country over coming home to family. You're just someone wearing her face. That's when I understood this wasn't about extending the trip anymore. This wasn't even about reconciliation. They'd lured me here because they genuinely believed I was sick, corrupted, in need of saving, and they'd decided they were going to save me whether I wanted it or not. The morning of my flight, I woke up at 4 a.m., and my return ticket was gone from my bag. I'd packed the night before, quietly, trying not to alert anyone. My flight was at 10 a.m., which meant I needed to leave for the airport by 6:30 at the latest. I'd already called a taxi, confirmed the pickup time, rehearsed what I'd say if my parents tried to guilt me one more time. I was prepared for tears, for accusations, for one final emotional manipulation attempt. I was not prepared for them to physically stop me. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, both my parents were already awake, sitting in the living room like they'd been waiting. My father stood up immediately. "You're not going anywhere." I tried to stay calm. "My flight is in a few hours, the taxi. We'll be here soon. We can talk about planning another visit, but I need to go home now." "This is your home," my mother said quietly. That's when I noticed my printed ticket confirmation on the coffee table, torn into pieces. My father saw me staring at it. "You don't need that anymore. We've decided you're staying." The word decided made my blood run cold. Not, "we're asking." Not, "we hope." Decided. Past tense. Final. I pulled out my phone to show them my digital ticket, my hands shaking. "I have everything on my phone. I'm going to the airport." I moved toward the door. My father stepped in front of it. "No, you're not." I tried to go around him. He grabbed my arm, not gently. My mother stood up and positioned herself next to him, blocking the other side. I looked at both of them and realized with absolute horror that they meant it. They were going to physically prevent me from walking out that door. "This is insane," I whispered. "You can't just keep me here." My father's grip tightened. "We're your parents. We're doing what's best for you. The Australian chapter is closed. You're staying in India now, with your family, where you belong." Outside, I heard a car horn. My taxi. My escape. And I couldn't reach it. I didn't know my brother was part of the plan until I tried to leave again the next morning. After the first failed escape attempt, I'd spent the night locked in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. My phone still worked. I could call the embassy. I could call my partner. I could scream for help. But some part of me was still in denial, still believing this was temporary insanity that would pass. That my parents would wake up and realize what they'd done. At dawn, I heard voices downstairs. My parents were talking to someone. Then I heard a third voice. Male. Familiar. My brother. He lives 2 hours away. There's no reason he'd be here at 6 a.m. unless they'd called him specifically, unless this was planned. When I came downstairs, he was sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea, looking completely comfortable. Like this was normal. Like his sister wasn't being held hostage. I tried to read his expression. Was there any sympathy? Any recognition that this was wrong? Nothing. "You're here," I said, my voice hollow. He nodded. "Mom and Dad told me you're going through something, that you're not thinking clearly. I'm here to help." "Help?" I repeated. "I'm not sick. I'm not going through anything except being held here against my will." My father cut in. "Your brother understands what we're doing. He agrees with us." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. He's always been bigger than me, stronger. When we were kids, he'd protect me from bullies. Now he was the bully. Or worse, he was the enforcer for our parents' delusion. "You can't seriously be okay with this," I said to him. He set down his tea. "You've changed. You're not the sister I grew up with. Maybe sometime back home we'll help you remember who you are." That's when I understood. He wasn't here to mediate. He wasn't here to help me escape. He was here to make sure I couldn't. My parents knew I might try to physically push past them, so they'd called in someone I couldn't overpower. My own brother had become my jailer. Here's what I learned while trapped in that house. Love is not enough to heal a relationship built on control. I flew to India because I believed reconciliation was possible, if I just tried hard enough, if I showed up, if I gave them time, if I proved my love was real. But reconciliation requires 2 willing participants. It requires mutual respect. It requires both people seeing each other as autonomous human beings with the right to make their own choices. My parents never saw me that way. To them, I was property that had wandered off and needed to be reclaimed. The biggest mistake I made wasn't going to India. It was going without a backup plan. I had no emergency contact who knew my exact location. No check-in schedule with friends. No prearranged code word with my partner that would signal I was in danger. I walked into a potentially hostile environment with nothing but hope and a return ticket. And hope, I learned, is not a safety net. If you're reading this and considering reconnecting with family members who've shown you disrespect, control, or manipulation, please hear me. You cannot fix people who believe your independence is a sickness. You cannot reason with people who think imprisonment is love. and you absolutely cannot trust people who've already shown you they value control over your well-being. I wanted my future children to know their grandparents, but what I didn't ask myself was, what kind of grandparents would they be? Would they respect my parenting decisions? Would they honor boundaries? Or would they see my children as another opportunity for control? The family you're born into doesn't automatically deserve access to the family you create. Reconciliation is not surrender. It's not about going back to how things were or accepting unacceptable behavior because they're family. Real reconciliation requires acknowledgement of harm, genuine change, and mutual respect. Without those elements, you're not healing a relationship. You're just giving your abusers another chance to hurt you. I'm still in this house. I'm still searching for a way out. But I'm no longer searching for their approval. That died the moment my father called me filth. The moment my brother chose to be my guard instead of my ally. Some relationships aren't meant to be saved. Some families are traps disguised as love, and recognizing that isn't giving up. It's surviving. If this story touched you, remember, you don't need permission from your family to live your own life. You need the courage to set boundaries, the clarity to recognize control disguised as love, and the strength to choose your own freedom over their approval. That is the kind of strength that saves your life. Thank you for watching to the end. If today's story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped between loyalty and self-preservation, please hit subscribe so you won't miss new episodes every week. Which moment hit you the hardest? Was it the "you are filth" confrontation? The brother becoming the jailer? The missed flight? Tell me in the comments below. Your perspective matters. Don't forget to like the video so the algorithm knows you want more stories about breaking free, finding your voice, and surviving family trauma. If you're watching from a particular city or country, share where you're tuning in from. I'd love to see how wide our community of survivors and supporters reaches.